Life is too short for you to hold your breath. Life is too short for you to put a face on or a mask and not be what you really are. Life is too short to not be authentic. It is just too short to not be a lot of things.
Hi there, I'm Bex Craig, and you're listening to the Not Just Anything podcast for women who want it whole. I hope you'll join me each week as we hear real stories from real women about how they've curated a whole life by design rather than by default. On today's episode, I'm talking to Nadia Espinosa, who is the Director of Finance in Asia Pacific for LinkedIn, but she's also, as we know on this podcast, so much more than that. She is a passionate powerhouse whose thirst for life is really apparent to anybody who's had the chance to meet her. And in our conversation today, Nadia shares really candidly and openly about her experiences, whether it was moving countries all over the world, the trauma of her adjustment to motherhood, and along the way offers these warm, authentic stories that really will capture your hearts and leave you on the edge of your seat. So without further ado, here's Nadia. I'm absolutely thrilled to have the fabulous Nadia Espinosa joining me today for another episode of Not Just Anything. Nadia, a huge welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this show.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. And I'm excited to hear all of the different experiences that you've had and for you to showcase a bit more of your learnings and your journey along the way. And so I always start with this question, which it feels quite meaty, but what is the story of you? Who is Nadia? Who is this person that we're getting some insight into today?
Yeah, so I am coming from very humble beginnings. So I'm originally from Colombia, immigrant parents and immigrant myself. And then just kind of grew up in New York and went through some rough beginnings, like coming from a middle-class family in Colombia and then starting all over. Very poor parents, had to start working in like McDonald's, cleaning hotel rooms and I just had to see that struggle, which I think in a way molded me to get a lot of momentum and ambition and resilience growing up. And I just really focused on that growing up in the US, trying to get a lot of the assimilate as much as possible, but at the same time, continue to be proud of my culture, my background. I just knew I had to work really hard on kind of telling my story and building a legacy in the US and, subsequently living in Canada, and then really just focusing on my profession, which brought me to Singapore. And then working in Singapore, an aerospace company, and then working then later on getting my degree, my executive MBA, and then shifting over to the internet space, where I think just gave me a completely different perspective in life, in inclusiveness and diversity, and just empowering women and bringing women forward under a different light, and not forgetting any of the story behind my resilience and sort of my passion for paying it forward, and now even more as a mother.
Thank you so much. It's a perfect place to start. And you use the word passion. And whenever I think of you, I always think of this kind of passion that just exudes out of you. And what I'd love to understand a bit more is you've touched on all these different experiences that you have had along the way of many different countries, of the experience of landing somewhere and having to start fresh and really having to dig in, you kept saying, into your resilience. So how have those experiences, I suppose, shaped you into the person that you are today and what you really care about?
I mean, it all started with just looking at my parents, right? And seeing what they went through. And just seeing that we were comfortable in Colombia. We had a really good lifestyle. And then we moved to the US to see this big pot of gold. And when we got to the US, it's like starting from zero, from scratch, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, not knowing the environment. We're living in a studio apartment, 5 people in a studio apartment, like kind of technically sleeping all together, and just really bonding again as a family, and just going down to like very, very humbled beginnings again, and seeing my parents like struggle working two jobs. I barely saw them as a kid. I can't even imagine myself like having my kids at 8 years old, not seeing myself, seeing me, seeing my husband, and just teaching myself a lot of the schoolwork but seeing their work ethic and seeing that it's okay to start again. It's okay to fail. It's okay to succeed, and not really forgetting the humility of just being a hustler and being really strong and really passionate, and just never forgetting to be happy and to remember your why. Why do you want to be happy? And your because family, because togetherness, and because of a future. And so I just feel like taking that for granted is a non it's a non-negotiable. Like, I don't want to take that for granted. I want to be able to use that and to really just take my generation to the next level and help my kids see that future.
Yes, and I feel such a strong sense of pride and gratitude, really, for what your parents have instilled in you. And you said, you touched, I love this phrase, my because. And obviously, we hear a lot about my why, the Simon Sinek, but my because. So, and you touched on family. What else is part of your because?
I think my generation suffered so much through, like, unfair treatment, inequality or things like that. And I just feel like, from my perspective, my because is I want to have my family together. I want to just continuously appreciate life, continuously understand that we shouldn't just celebrate the highs. We should also celebrate the lows, because that's what makes us stronger. Because I want to be resilient, because I want to be happy, because I want to be with my family together. Because I think at the end of the day, when the title, the materialism and everything goes away, you only have yourself and the love that you built around you. I just feel like that's ultimately what you take with you, no matter where you go.
Yeah, someone described this the other day as like a cloak that we're able to wear. It's what we carry. And you've touched a few times on the fact that you are a mother now. You've twins, which are just a huge amount of admiration for anybody that has twins. But could you maybe share a little bit about your experience into parenthood, and how that what has that brought into your life as well?
Yeah, I think like my pivotal change into parenthood happened before I even had kids. So while I was trying to get pregnant, and when I got pregnant and then was hospitalized 3 months prior to giving birth because I had a complication. I think the 3 months, 2.5, I think it was like 2.5, 3 months in the hospital was such a pivotal moment for me to reflect on what's really important to me, and how do we really help others that are going through similar issues. It doesn't have to be like a terrible experience in the hospital, but it could be something like postpartum depression. It could be, just struggling with organizing your life. It just had so much time to reflect in this room full of other women that were coming for similar complications. And we were like on a 24-hour watch in the hospital, and people coming from all over the world, all different walks of life, all different, intense and backgrounds. And I just felt like that was such an amazing time for me to just really reflect and just realize, wow, if you yourself are not whole, nothing else really matters, because you're going to be changed with so many different challenges. And at the end of the day, what really matters? What really matters to me? What really motivates me? What really moves me? How can I help others kind of feel that empowerment that I felt in such a terrible, terrible time for me? Just for more context, I was hospitalized at 22 weeks. My kids were giving a 27% chance of survival. I really was sitting there, feeling really hopeless and thinking that I had no control over what was going to happen next. But what I realized over the 2.5 month period that I was really sitting there incubating my children so that they would have a better chance of survival, I realized that a lot of it is here in your heart and your mind.
Gosh, I thank you so much for your courage to share that. And I can sort of imagine people like as I'm listening, I feel it's emotional. And so you said you were in the hospital from 22 weeks, which is that's basically halfway through your pregnancy. You've still got the rest of the half to go through. So how did that journey continue on? What kind of got you through it, as you said, to beyond just survival?
I did a lot of meditation. I did a lot of crying. I did a lot of talking to friends. I did a lot of talking to the women. I think really the biggest part is just I was in a room. So just to have you picture this, I was in the room with 5 other beds around me. So it was 6 beds total in the room. And we couldn't all stay in our own independent room because we were on a 24-hour watch, right? And so I would, no matter at all hours of the night, we would have different patients coming in and out. There were women that would come in because their water broke halfway through, their pregnancy and they needed to get emergency surgery, but they weren't ready for the surgery. And so anyways, there was a lot of different complications, right? And a lot of us would just be there in the middle of the night, waking up, like keeping each other comfort, cheering each other on. And we were complete strangers. Like they were just all walks of life and we just comforted each other. At that point, I realized we have so much power to just help each other out, but people are just not telling their stories. They're not talking about it. They're focusing on the positive moments that are Instagrammable. And those are the moments that I felt like we're just missing so much. We're missing so much power and we're missing so much ability to help each other out if we were just more authentic and open about our experiences, especially during some time like this. And so it was really the conversations that I had with those women that I will never forget.
I think, I mean, what you're touching on here for me is like at the essence of bravery. Really, it's very brave, and it's almost like we're conditioned, as you touched on. What's Instagrammable is how we are conditioned to portray our life, and as women, and especially I think as mums, we're told that even if our experience is harrowing, whatever that looks like, that we should be joyful, or that we should, or that we need to, or that we, any of these things. And what I think is so powerful about what you're saying is, what if for a moment we all just stopped trying to do what was expected and just shared from the heart? This is how I'm finding it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So as women, when we have kids, when we become mothers, before we're pregnant, it's like, enjoy it while you're trying to get pregnant. Don't stress out too much. When you're pregnant, it's like exercise, take time off, or don't work too hard. And everything is about like trying to make you feel better. But sometimes you just have to digest what's not making you feel good. You have to talk about it. Some women, like I did not enjoy when my kids were born, I was so traumatized that I had the nurse in the ward take the kids back to the ward. And I was like, I can't process kids right now because I was so overwhelmed by the moment. And a lot of women are just like, oh my God, that means you hated your kids when they were born. No, I loved my kids. I was happy. But guess what? During that time, I was not processing things correctly. I as a person had completely changed in a matter of 24 hours. And no book you read is preparing you for that. No advice you get is preparing you for that. And I wasn't ready. I wanted to get a return policy on having kids because it was like, how do I take care of them? How do I know if they're breathing correctly? So all my feelings came to me at the same time and nobody was preparing me for that because all I had heard about birth was, Jennifer, you had such an amazing experience. That picture was beautiful. You can hear them breathe. I'm like, that's not what I'm experiencing. I feel terrible. I don't know how to breastfeed. I feel like everything around me was just not helping me process those feelings because either people wanted me to feel euphoria and happiness, which I wasn't feeling, or they wanted to just block out any feeling that I was having. And I realized that that's just not the way to support women through this journey. And I actually think that's one of the reasons that a lot of women have very bad, traumatic, long-lasting experiences because we're not allowing them to tell their stories because we ourselves are not telling our own stories.
Oh, so powerful. And here you are telling yours. here you are doing exactly that. And this kind of thread of taking a stand for women, taking a stand for genuine experience is already a bit of a theme here. And why is that so important to you?
Because I think it dominates everything else. The experience that you have and how you process that experience, how you visualize it, how do you talk about it, how do you release that, really has an impact on your overall happiness in the long term. It has an impact on the way that you position yourself as a woman, whether you want to go back to the workforce, whether you don't want to go back to the workforce, whether you want to be a full-time mother, whether you want to start your own business. I really think that the way that we process that experience, however negative or positive it is, it has a long-term impact in terms of what's going to happen next. If you just exhale and you just process your experience, then you're able to really understand what is it that you really want to do next. And when do you want to do it? Not when everybody else tells you you have to do it, but when do you want to do it? And that's what makes you a successful woman. Not because you got an amazing job and got promoted afterwards or before. You're a successful mother, woman, when you're happy where you are. Mm-hmm. Everything else falls into place. And I realize that is the root cause of a lot of problems. And there's a lot of reason that women are falling off the workforce, right? There's an ecosystem of issues and challenges that we're having. But if we don't fix the processing of our emotions, we're not going to go very far in terms of supporting each other and really elevating women to where they should be.
Yeah, and what you said about really coming to the core of, you said what makes us happy, for me is really what's at the core of all of this. It's about taking charge of that somewhat, starting to understand what that needs to look like, and stepping in and saying, these are the things that I can control. There are things I cannot control, but this is what I want to design. And so you had this, just to kind of go back to this experience, because I think it's really illustrative here. You had this experience, which you've described as traumatic. It sounds like a lot to go through. And you identified that there was not kind of the support from, in that process for what was actually helpful for. So how did you get yourself to where you are now? How did you start to build yourself back up, recalibrate that identity that you've mentioned?
I just started to look internally because I realized that externally I wasn't getting a lot of help. When I would speak to other women after giving birth, they had not gone through my experience, and they had forgotten a lot of the experiences that they had gone through themselves. So they were just saying, hey, but at least your baby's fine, or at least you're healthy. And I'm like, yes, but I still haven't gotten over the fact that that I couldn't move, or that I can't move my hips because my hips broke in the process, or that I couldn't breastfeed properly, or that I can't sleep laying down because I can't extend my legs properly, and I can't hold both babies at the same time. Like, there's little things that I didn't want to go into details with everybody. I would find myself crying a lot. And yes, I have a husband that was very loving. I have a mother who is just amazing. Sisters, I can talk to them, but to a certain extent. And so I started to look internally, and I was like, okay, what is causing my anxiety? What is really there? How do I heal myself? Because the remedy is inside of me. So I started to do a lot of reflection, a lot of meditation, a lot of just self-empowerment, talking to myself about, how to process things properly. I started to, do what I felt my body needed at the time. When I was exhausted, I started to just rest. I mean, it sounds so basic, but a lot of the times there's people are expecting you to be a machine once you give birth, right? And you also then set those expectations for yourself. I started to say, what do I want? What do I feel? And when I started to accept my feelings and not fit into another person's perspective of what a mother is when I realized I was performing at my best. Then
Mhm.
subsequently, and other things would come up. Like I started to get some calls from work about what is my next career move. And I was like, wait a second, like
Hold on.
I'm not ready to talk about my career. I could barely sleep without crying, thinking my babies are not going to breathe in the middle of the night because my daughter was born with some breathing difficulties. So I started to say no. And that empowerment of saying no, I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to talk about that right now. No, I don't want to process that right now. That made me feel so strong.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm so inspired by what you're sharing. I think, three things that you just said that just really strongly resonate. One is the remedy is within. Whoa, how true is that? How true is that? The second thing is this idea of really, I'm hearing trusting yourself, because to say no is a conscious choice where you are actually saying no to something. You are in fact saying yes to something else. You're saying no, I'm not ready to have that conversation right now because I'm trusting that I need to be saying yes to this situation that I'm in. And it's like what I'm hearing is you said, I felt strong. It's powerful. It's powerful when we step in there. And what did that start to open up for you? Because you alluded to it a little bit on the career front, but as you started to listen to yourself a little bit more here, what opened up?
I think what made me realize is actually I was always kind of like very gun ho, very ambitious, and very accelerated when it comes to my career specifically. I always put it first. I put it first before my health. I put it first before sometimes even like family commitments, obviously before having kids. But I realized that once I was ready to have the conversation and I knew that my maternity leave was going to end and I needed to go back to work, I had a big question mark in my head. What what do I feel like makes me complete? Not
Mhm.
what does it look good to
Mhm.
society or what do people expect out of me? I remember thinking, okay, I have 1 month to realize how I'm going to turn everything on again, how I'm going to turn my mind to get into work mode, how am I going to turn my mind to balance things out, how am I going to, accelerate my learning process. And then I realized, wait a second, like it doesn't work like that. Like
Mhm.
genetically, your brain is actually still has changed when you have children and people don't realize that you actually
Mhm.
do not process things the same way because there is parts of your brains that have been modified. And I was like, it doesn't all need to happen in 1 month. It doesn't. All I have to figure out is what do I want? Do I want to go back or do I not want to go back? How do I want to go back? How do I want to show up so I feel good? Because if I feel good, I succeed. And then I started to just build, like I said, build my foundation around that. Speak to my manager around how do I want to show up to work? How can I transition myself in? And luckily I was in an environment where that was actually supported. Not everybody is in the same environment. But I started
Mhm.
on a very first level, I started with my personal life. Okay, how do I want to have my kids at home? Do I want to have a nanny? Do I want to send them to infant care? I decided at the time infant care because I felt like more confident about a group of people taking care of an infant rather than one person. I just started to like kind of like chip at it little by little because I felt like actually that was the biggest pressure. The biggest pressure was my own expectation and society's expectation that the day I would come
Mhm.
back, day one, that I would be like this like superstar blowing it out of the water
Mhm.
and just be there from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. That was actually a mirage or an image that I had that I don't know where it was coming from, but it was something that I thought was expected and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself for. And so I realized,
Mhm.
no, I have to set realistic expectations. That doesn't mean I'm lowering the standard on my work. That doesn't mean I'm not performing. It just means I have to set something that really sets me up for success. And that was kind of like my pivotal point when my maternity leave was about to end.
It's so much intentionality, and what comes to mind for me is we do this a lot in coaching. The coaching work we do is always designing the partnership, designing the relationship, and you talked about that in so many different ways, like having conversation with your husband. How does this need to look? Thinking about the whole system, your mother, your children, and then also for work. And so you've started to really build this narrative around whole, and so how would you articulate what this wholeness or fulfillment means for you in your life? Like, what is it that you're working towards here?
I think one of the biggest parts about being whole is not waiting for something to happen for things to be right or for you to be happy. You have to enjoy the journey. And maybe have to sounds a bit like abrupt, but you have to work on specific things for you to understand, to appreciate the journey, even during challenging times. Life is too short for you to hold your breath. Life is too short for you to put a face on or a mask and not be what you really are. Life is too short to not be authentic. It is just too short to not be a lot of things. So you have to be able to understand that you're going to process things. You're going to go through hard times. You're going to cry. You're going to laugh. You're going to be sad. You're going to be upset, and understand it and accept it. You don't have to stop it from happening, but while it's happening, understand the moment and process the moment in a way that is a learning moment, that is an opportunity for you to really grow and accept that these things happen. And you'll see that eventually you don't live by milestones. Like eventually I don't get to a point where I'm like, well, I'm going to wait until my kids are 5 years old because then they won't throw tempers and then they'll be a lot better to have fun with. Well, that means that from now until they're 5 years old, I'm just going to hate my life because I'm just waiting until they're 5 years old. No, it's about enjoying everything that you're going through. And it doesn't mean that you're laughing out loud and you're just going to sleep blissfully, but that you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think the control piece, and what I'm hearing is this, like, we all expend so much energy fighting ourselves, judging ourselves for, we shouldn't feel like so sad, or somebody else coped and went through it like this. And I'm hearing is this recognizing that you're at choice and being a little bit less judgmental with ourselves about how we do walk through life. Express it, express our range, express our humanity.
Yes. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have right now. We're surrounded. I mean, we've heard this story before, right? We're surrounded by so many stories of success that we feel that whatever we're going through, because it's not at that point, it's a failure, or we're not there yet. And in the process of feeling that you're not there yet, you're not enjoying your life. You're not creating yourself.
Yeah, it's I'm just reading this book by Eckhart Tolle, and he's The Power of Now, and it's exactly this. It's like all we have is the present. And so if you're spending all your time worrying that you're not looking at the past or thinking about the future, then are you really on this journey? And so you talk about success in a way that I find really fascinating. So how will you think about success in your life? Like what's the success marker that you are on a journey towards, or do you think about it like that?
So a lot of the times, because I was influenced by the way that we think about career development, or the way we think about, what we see on social media, what books tells us is that, you're successful if you reach a certain level in an organization or you create your own business to a certain degree. But then I started, during the time that I faced my challenges, right? I started to think about, no, success for me is, am I living to the fullest extent, and am I fulfilling my because? And my because is, I want my family to be together because love is the only thing that keeps me going. I think success is my ability to continuously remind myself and live towards my because. And if I live towards just one milestone in my life, I miss out on a lot of other moments to just be there, to be present. And I just think that that's success. Success is the ability for you just to enjoy the present and live for your because.
I love the live for the because. I just think it's such a powerful phrase, and I think it connects in a way that makes it very tangible for people. And so you are often called on to speak to groups of women. I know I've been one of the women in speeches that you've given and panels that you've been part of. And one of the things that you often talking to women about is that confidence and is that authenticity. What is the kind of message that you're hoping to spread loudly in the world for women, or just in general, that you want to get out for people to hear?
I think overall, finding your true self, letting go, not holding yourself in, it's not worth it. There's so much capacity and capability in your heart, in your soul as a woman to tell your story, to build yourself up, because it all starts from here. Anything about your career, anything about your family, anything that you want to create in life starts from you being a fully formed, happy, authentic woman. You can you can become anything you want. But if you're not happy at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. And what I want to tell women is I know what it feels to be empty at times. And I know what it feels to feel alone in the process. But you don't have to feel that way. You can actually recharge yourself because it's all within you. You don't have to get anything else externally. There's nothing externally that's going to help you but yourself.
Yeah, and gosh, don't we? I have this sensation that we're all holding our breath. I mean, definitely this week, big week, but also the whole year. I feel like there's holding the breath, and there's a stressor involved in that. And so I'm curious. You've gone through these journeys. You've got a lot of clarity when you're talking about listening and trusting to yourself. Do you still have passages of self-doubt? And if you do, what are you doing to rally yourself in those moments you said where I felt alone, or where I feel empty, or where I feel doubtful?
Oh, all the time. I think it's normal to go through it all the time. Like, I think there's moments in life where you feel like, oh, I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good employee. I can't manage this. I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good sister. I'm not a good daughter. Like, there's times where you're just down in the dumps. And I think that's totally normal. And my point in all this is embrace the fact that you're feeling that way. It is okay. There's a reason you're feeling that way. Is the reason that you're feeling that way because you're trying to live up to somebody else's expectations, or because you yourself feel like you're not being your whole self? And just kind of like finding the root cause for that rationale. And I do a lot of like just time alone, walking, thinking, listening to music. I like to listen to Jiruma, which is one of my favorite pianists, and listening to music, helping center myself so that I know, why am I feeling this way? But embracing that feeling. I cannot emphasize this enough. The moment that you try to suppress your feelings, you're just kicking the can. You are not addressing the real reason that you have specific feelings. What is it? So you start to kind of like peel the layers. And I do a lot of that. I do a lot of like exploratory thinking about what is causing the feeling that I'm having. And once I get to the root cause, I just immediately address it. Like, I don't let it linger. And it doesn't mean that you don't talk to anybody by no means am I saying that you cannot talk to anybody. Sometimes you need to talk to people to try to figure out how to find a solution to a problem you have. But at the end of the day, I just do a lot of like self-reflection, and I don't let that linger. That is the biggest issue that I have. To linger, to suppress a feeling and to let a problem linger is the worst thing for me.
Yeah, it's funny. As you're talking, I have this image of almost like you're letting the feeling is here. It's like knocking on the door. This emotion is here. It's like you're opening the door up for a period of time for it so that you can get curious and discover, okay, where is this coming from, and ask it some questions. And then it's like, okay, now I've got the data. I've understood and I've taken time, and now you can politely now leave so that I can move on. That's kind of the image that it conjures up for me when you're talking. What do you do to also invest? I love that you talk about music, because I think music is incredibly powerful. I love music. For me, when I'm incredibly stressed or angry or whatever, I play the piano. It's a major form of stress relief for me. And I've done this even since I was a young child. Mum always used to say she'd know if I'd had a bad day because I'd come in and just bash it out on the piano. So you listen to music. What else do you do to sort of invest in yourself in your busy life?
So I have dedicated weekends where I just say one day, this is Nadia Day. I get to do what I need to do. And so I build a foundation or a group of people that help me with succeeding in that, like having a guilt-free day where I can go and do what I want to do, and I don't have to be disturbed by anything unless something happens of an emergency. I try to find time for myself, whether it's exercising or whether it's just literally doing nothing. Not necessarily like watching TV or Netflix or whatever, but I really think it's doing nothing, like sitting in the bed, looking at the ceiling and thinking. Or even just finding that time to just listen to music. I also love music, by the way. And so I create playlists, a lot of playlists in my Spotify. And sometimes I have just fun times with my friends where we share Spotify playlists and we play it out loud, and we do FaceTime with each other, and then we just play the music. And I think it's fun. It's like a mini party. And so I do things that just remind me of who I am. And that at the end of the day, first and foremost, I am Nadia. And I am not a mom first. I am not a daughter first. I am not a sister first. I'm not an employee first. I am Nadia. And what is it that I like? What is it that I want to do? And when I come back during those moments or those days, I am a much better mother, daughter, wife, sister than I could ever be.
It's like recharging, re-energizing. If you think about it, we plug our computers in to refill their batteries, and what I'm hearing is kind of similar. I'm going to just take a step out. It doesn't have to be intellectual or impressive or whatever everybody might subscribe to having to do during their me time. It's just what I do to make myself feel happy and fulfilled and re-energized so that I can recommit to these roles, because everything else you're describing are essentially roles that you're playing.
Yeah. And my whole point in telling you this is anything that you want to do doesn't have to be something that you think you have to do. And so you're right. It's the recharging, but it's the authentic recharging with your original batteries, and not with everything else that you need to accomplish in life.
Yes, it's this mantra of going back to self, which we keep coming back to in this conversation. Knowing yourself, knowing what matters, being true to that, but also being deliberate and intentional about that.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about all these different aspects that make you who you are and what you're working towards. And I'm just curious about the legacy that you're wanting to build in the world, not just for your own children, but for their entire generations to come. What is this legacy that's calling?
I mean, one of the biggest things that I want to leave is our ability to just tell our own story and to be, like I keep saying, be full and comfortable with who we are. For an example, my kids are mixed children. I'm Colombian American. My husband's Malaysian, Singaporean, Indian race. And I want them to be able to really grow up and not have to feel like they have an identity crisis and not feel like they have to fit under somebody's category of who they are. Or that they feel like they have to check that box. Unfortunately, systematically, a lot of our systems are set up in a way that you have to fill into a specific category for you to identify yourself. I want to take that off. I want to remove that in my children. I want them to be able to tell their story, to be able to feel confident in who they are, and to feel like they are themselves a mini melting pot of beautiful authenticity, right? And I want them to just be able to shine and see that as like a uniqueness that they can bring forward and help elevate other folks, other people that they meet along the way, so that they're totally comfortable in their own skin and they're totally able to survive anything that they face. They're going to face a lot of issues in the future, hopefully less than I did, but they're going to face a lot of adversity, and they're going to face a lot of people that are just not comfortable with who they are. I want to be able to raise children to be able to stand on their own and say, I got this, mom. I can do this. I know who I am. Nobody's going to tell me how to be.
Something so important that you just touched on there is this idea that wanting everybody to embrace and more fully stand up and take a stand for who they are and all of the uniqueness that makes them, you know, who they are. And at the same time, that might not resonate with everybody, and that is okay. What do you say to women that are afraid that if they show up as themselves, if they really show the world, this is me, my full range of emotions and everything that I am, that people might not gel with that?
I think it's part of the learning journey, and it's about there's going to be moments where you feel totally, and this is why I think building yourself up internally and strengthening yourselves as a person is what's going to help you survive those moments. You're going to come across people that are totally disappointed in you, people that feel like you're just not living up to your potential. There's people that are just don't understand you. You're too complicated, or you're too outspoken, or you are just not what, society thinks a mother, a professional, a leader should be. And you just have to be able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in an uncomfortable moment. So you have to be able to continue to tell your story, because you'd be surprised how many of those people years later may reflect upon that moment when they met you, or that moment when they came across that connection with you. And even if they didn't enjoy it or they didn't agree with you, it might change them in the future. But you don't have to worry about that. You just have to worry about you yourself and you being comfortable with what you are.
Yes.
Winston Churchill has a quote that says, if you live your life without having no enemies, it means you never stood up for anything in your life at all. And yes, enemy is a very strong word, but life is bumpy. And at the end of the day, you answer to yourself.
Play your own game. I mean, Oscar Wilde always says, be yourself, everybody else is taken. And I think that this has been sort of somewhat of a narrative: forge your own path, step out. And what I would always say is there is something magnetic about people that are authentic. It's got magnetism to it. And okay, magnets can also repulse. And if it does, and some people are not able to be with you, then maybe that is also okay. Maybe that is also okay. But as you said, it's irrelevant, because it's about you. It's about your opinion of yourself and how you're walking through the world and how you're blazing your own path. And that is vastly more interesting because it is your life.
When you're more comfortable in your own skin, it sounds like a cheesy metaphor, but it's true. When you're comfortable in your own skin, you create a lot more followership. The more you create a lot more followers, it's because people feel like, oh, I want to be like you. I want to feel the way you do. It doesn't necessarily mean that they understand you, but I want to feel the way that you do. I want to be able to build strength the way you did. How do I do that? And I feel like just by you inspiring that one person, it just makes a difference. Don't worry about the rest. Everything will just fall into place.
Yes, you do it, and you create space for others to do the same, and they reflect that back to you tenfold. I totally agree. Oh, so beautiful, Nadia. Honestly, I'm so touched. I'm so touched that you have shared all of these stories so openly, and that you are stepping into this so clearly for all to see. Everybody that knows you knows this is true of you. And I hope that more leaders are like this, and more women the world over are prepared to take a stand for their because, let it go, breathe, all of the things that you've reminded us of today. So heartfelt
and thank you for inviting
sharing
me, and hopefully if I can help one of the listeners out there just to feel like they can breathe, then I've done my job.
More than. Thanks, Nadia.
Thank you, Bex.
Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Not Just Anything for Women Who Want It Whole. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to our weekly podcast and leave us a review. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here with us, and we look forward to having you join again. And remember, be brave, be whole, be you.